Before our next planned event, we wanted to take another audience moment. So we have another question for you. If you guys could turn to each other and just for a little bit ask each other or talk about whether you think Hillary Clinton's gender has hurt her or helped her in this campaign. Discuss. That's good. That'll give them something to look at.
Either we win this election or we're going to lose our country.
He says everything that all of us want to say, and because we have to be politically correct, we can't say it.
That immigration proposal that came out a few days ago, 4 or 5 pages, very easy to read, made a lot of sense.
He says what all the other candidates don't have the guts to say, and that's what sets him apart.
Times readers, hello, how are you tonight? I'm Nick Confessore. Beside me is Anthony Scaramucci, who is an investor, a TV host, and an economic advisor to Donald Trump. I should say, according to my records here, before that he backed Jeb Bush, before that he backed Scott Walker, and before that in 2008 he gave a few $1,000 to Barack Obama. I
wanted to back Nick Confessore, but he wasn't available at the time.
So he is well acquainted with this very strange election season. Anthony, I want to start by asking you, how on earth do you go from Barack Obama to Donald Trump? It sounds like the Iliad.
Good question. Okay, so briefly on that, I'm a socially inclusive, fiscally responsible Republican. And so the reason why I didn't say socially liberal is that we spent billions of dollars destroying the word liberal to half the nation. And the reason I didn't say fiscally conservative is we spent billions and billions of dollars destroying that word too. So I'm a socially inclusive, fiscally responsible Republican. I went to law school with President Obama. I like President Obama. I still like President Obama. I disagree with President Obama's policies, but, you know, and I can explain why. But when I met him after law school and he talked about running for the presidency, I said, okay, this is a guy that I could back. Just briefly, when the decisions were made related to the auto bailout and he abrogated the contract law, and we can debate what happened there, whether it was fair or not, that was a breaking of about 800 years of precedent in commercial contract law. Then I got worried and returned back to my Republican roots.
But from Obama to Trump,
yeah,
right? Polar opposites in a lot of ways. Is there anything in common between these two men?
In some ways, extremely polar opposite. In other ways, whether people in the room like it or not, they do understand certain things that are going on in the society. And so, and by the way, I wish as a Republican, with President Obama's swag and his personality and his family orientation as a great family person, I'd love to have him be a Republican. You know, I mean, Sean Hannity would chip his face into Mount Rushmore. But as it relates to both of them, they do have one thing in common. They understand the struggle. And maybe President Obama understands it from the way he grew up, and he would tell you if he was in this room in the 1980s, he would try to hail a cab in New York City, and some of the cabs would blow him by. And so he understands that slice of Americana. What Donald Trump understands, again, whether you guys like it or not, is that there is a blue-collar desperation in our society right now. There is an anxiety for a lot of the people that I frankly grew up with. You know, my dad was an hourly worker. In the 1970s, we had a phenomenal middle-class upbringing. I would never dishonor my dad by telling you guys I grew up poor. I did not grow up poor. We had Sears Tough Skins and Schwinn bicycles, and we were taking air conditioners in and out of the bedrooms and so forth. But my dad today, that same job, and I priced it last year, Nick, the wages are down 45% for the same person that had my father's job in 1975. In 2015, we would have been just above the poverty line. And so, you know, I'm not saying we'd be on government assistance. Maybe we would be, maybe we wouldn't. But there are 47.5 million Americans on governmental assistance right now. And I can tell you, I've been to a lot of these rallies. They do not want to be on governmental assistance.
So New York City, and high finance even, is not necessarily Trump town.
Yeah, no question.
How many of your friends right now are for Trump? And what do they make of you being a high-profile supporter of Donald Trump?
Well, listen, I mean, we're in a, unfortunately, very polarized society. And so, listen, he's contributed to that. It's also been contributed on the other side. The politics of demonization exists. But if you're a large-scale corporate CEO, it would be absolutely foolish to support Mr. Trump, even if you agree with his policies, because your board's probably split in a bipartisan way. And if you look at the Venn diagram, supporting him will probably get you in trouble with half of your constituents. Michael Jordan has a great line. He says that everybody buys sneakers, so he never chooses a political candidate. And so that's probably true for large-scale corporations. I'm an entrepreneur. I own my own business. Love the country. I think that there are certain policies that we have to put in place if we really want to restore the working class and the middle class, and I don't think they're going to come from the left, and I can explain that if you guys want to know.
Let me ask you this, though, because we're talking about working class white people for the most part here.
Yep.
There are people in this country, some in this very room, who are afraid if Donald Trump becomes president. They're afraid for their rights, for their communities. What can you say to them about their lives under a Trump presidency if he wins, and how they would improve from now?
Here's what I would say. I would say that there is a arbitrage between his public persona and some of the rhetoric, and I would say that he's 17 or 18 months into being a politician, and so he's unschooled and he's undisciplined in the preciseness that you need in political rhetoric. Who's the best at that, in my opinion? President Obama. I would give him a 10 out of 10 in terms of speaking in a sort of a way which is not offensive. And so what I have found with Mr. Trump, and I've worked with him the last 4.5, 5 months, is that he's way more thoughtful in private than he would be on stage. Elton John said it.
Do you call him Donald, by the way, or Mr. Trump?
You know,
speak to him
I call him Donald, actually. But
okay, I want to clarify that.
I figure in this room, he's on the cusp of the presidency. I want to be respectful. But I do call him Donald because I've known him for a long period of time, and I work with him on the Governor Romney campaign. But just quickly on this, he is a personality, and he's a performance-oriented personality. And so Elton John said about Donald Trump that he's the best live stage performer that can't sing or play a musical instrument. and if you think about it from that point of view, I've been to rallies where I'm backstage, and he's saying something, and I'm going, oh, geez, that's going to be really troublesome. It's going to get reported. It's going to get flashed in the news cycle, and it's not going to be favorable. And he's doing it in a way because he's being driven by the crowd. He's being energized by the crowd. And so that's, but again, 17, 18 months.
That's a small comfort, though, to a person who feels that they're on the other end of what he's saying.
Listen, there's no question that his rhetorical floor. I can speak as a fellow New Yorker. You a New Yorker, Nick?
I am.
All right, so New Yorkers are prone to rhetorical floors, particularly Italian-American New Yorkers. And so what I can say to you is that he says a lot of stuff that comes out in the wrong sort of way, but he's got a great family. He cares about his employees. There are people that have worked for him for 40 years that have a tremendous amount of loyalty and respect for him. But he's not a politician. And now he's been a politician for 18 months, and so we're putting him under the prism of a politician, as we should, because he's being elected potentially to the most important job in the world, but he doesn't have the mannerisms or the vocabulary or the verbal discipline of a politician.
What do you think, if he is elected president, what would be the first concrete thing that you think would change for the better in this country in a Trump presidency? And don't say the wall. What would be a concrete thing that would change?
Well, yeah, I'll speak from an economic perspective. I think the number one thing that we have to do right now is we have to dial back some of the regulation in the system. I'm a big believer in an energetic government. You have to remember, I'm the product of a good public school system. And so without that good public school system, I couldn't have gone to Tufts and Harvard Law School. And so I would say to you that we need a powerful government, but we need a government that dials back some of the regulation, because when you're reffing a baseball game or you're reffing a basketball game, if you're over-reffing the economy, what ends up happening is you slow down the growth and you curb the opportunity for the less fortunate people in the economy. And so I would hope that we would move in a direction of good, active, energetic regulation, but not overly burdensome regulation, because I've seen that work, particularly in financial services, against the system. Community banks right now are not lending because of the Dodd-Frank legislation. That's hurting the small businesses, and it's stopping those small businesses from growing and hiring the incremental employee. So we have to figure that out.
Here's a final and probably important question. Right now, it looks like Donald Trump is unlikely to be the next president compared to Hillary Clinton, but we'll see. If he is not, there are a lot of Trump supporters out there who who are going to feel very angry and disillusioned about this election. What happens to those people going forward? What do they do? And what does their politics look like?
You know, I honestly wish I knew the question, so I can only guess at that question. But I do think that the Republican Party has to resynthesize. They have to have a moment where they get together and decide where they want to be, what policies they want to go to. The party has a lot of schisms in it. It's unlikely to win the American presidency as a Republican if you look at the electoral map under the current rubric. You know, I give money to the America Unity PAC, which, if you guys know what it is, it supports Republican candidates that are proponents for gay marriage and marriage equality. If the Republican Party does not open the tent to more people and be more socially inclusive, as I described early on, we're at grave danger of becoming a minority party. And if you're a Democrat in the room, you really don't want one super strong party and one very weak one, because that's how corruption starts. And so what you want are two energetic parties that can come together. So I'm hoping that we can come up with a communicator or a person on our side that can synthesize the angst of the, let's call it the Trump movement, understands the economic principles that the Republicans are espousing in terms of creating more growth, but also has the compassion necessary to recognize where the world is today and recognize where the culture is today, and so that we can create a bigger tent for the Republicans.
Are the people who are out there saying, kill her, assassinate her, are those people that can be led to better angels by a different kind of Republican Party?
You know, I'm a very big optimist in human beings, and I think that most of us, frankly, are designed to be very good. And I think we get the best out of our lives when we're helping other people. And so I would say this to both sides, that the rhetoric has been terrible in this race. The media has had some part in that. The politicians have had some part in that. You know, when I was in law school, the first week of law school, we did trial advocacy. And Alan Dershowitz said something to me that I'll never forget, and I'll share it quickly with you. If I'm wrong on the facts, demolish the prosecutor. Because if you can demolish the prosecutor, dehumanize him or her, and discredit them in front of the jury, you will likely win the case. And so the politicians understand that, going all the way back to Jefferson and Adams, where I think Jefferson called Adams a hermaphrodite. But we've gotten so far away from what we need to be discussing right now. If you think about the systemic issues in the society, we really have to have an ideas debate and a policy debate, and we have to have less of the name calling and less of the rhetoric. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we need to get people back in a zone like that on behalf of the American people.
I'm sure we can all agree on that. Anthony Scaramucci.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.